Welcome to Pet Sitter Confessional, an open and honest discussion about life as a pet sitter. Today, we're brought to you by our friends at Time to Pet and Pet Sitters International. The landscape of pet services is constantly changing, and this year, more than ever. How do we navigate things like changing regulations, like Ollie's Law and Colorado regulations around veterinary professional associates? What does it mean as new generations are becoming pet owners? How do we talk to them, market our businesses? And what's the impact of corporate buyouts on the pet industry? And how do we persist as small businesses? To answer these questions and many more, today we're really excited to have Carmen Rustenbeck from IBPSA on the show again, actually, to cover these topics. Carmen brings a lot of information, so I hope you have a pen and paper ready. Let's get started.
Thanks, Colin. It is so much fun to be back with you guys after this hot minute, which has been, I think, a year or two.
Yes.
IBPSA, International Boarding and Pet Service Association, we've been working really hard at looking at what new legislation is coming into the industry and how we can advocate for the industry. Also, we've been developing new education programs, so we've been really, really busy. We've had some change in our board. We've had some change in staff. So that always makes things sort of fun when you have change in board and staff and you have different new ideas come in. So we've been working really, really hard to stay ahead of the business curve that we've seen just sort of happen in the last 12 to 24 months that we weren't expecting. So it's been a challenge, but we're having fun.
Okay. There's always something new, right? There's always something to work on.
Always.
Well, so yeah, I want to dive right in there, Carmen, and just kind of get your sense of what have you been seeing that has changed since we've last spoke? What are some of the big things that you've seen going on?
Yeah, so I think probably one of the biggest things that we are seeing is this the M&A activity. So where we're acquiring small businesses and we're rolling them in with other organizations. So there's been a lot of buy, because there is a lot of cash out there that is looking for a place to land. And so we've had a lot of this buying and selling in our industry. So as that has happened, of course, that affects how many really what we call small business owners, how they see it. Because now, this is a good time for me to sell. I think I'm going to sell. And so they sell to whoever buys, the big companies, whoever that M&A company might be. And at first, it feels sort of good. And then they start to see the changes that happen to their facility because now the personal touch maybe is not so personal touch anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that little piece. At the same time, with all of these buyouts, now we're starting to see the pendulum switch a little bit because now they overbought. And the economy didn't go as fast as they thought it would go, the direction they thought. So we're starting to see some selling off from some of these M&As because they've overpurchased. So now we've had this really rush to buy for 2 years, 3 years. And now we're starting to see, we've overpurchased. Maybe we shouldn't have done that. And so we're starting to let go some of those facilities that we bought. So now they're coming back into the hands of the small business owner.
That's an interesting that you bring that up because this has really been on my mind really about the mergers and acquisitions as big money, these big investment firms start to again, they're always looking for where's the next growth going to happen. And we in the industry have known, the pet industry is going to grow, right? It's going to be, $500 million, or whatever it is, whatever the new estimate is. And so to know that that you're seeing this at that level going, facilities, small independently owned businesses are being bought. And are you seeing that they are being approached for their business, or are they seeking buy? Oh, okay.
They're being approached. And we know this from the IBPSA point of view because IBPSA members are highly educated and they're thinking through their business plan and where they want to go. And so those M&A companies are coming to us and saying, can we advertise through you, or can we come to your conference? Or so they're actively pursuing those members who are active in their association industry. And so I know if I could step back for a moment and speak to the pet sitter world, we know that there are pet sitters that have grown their business significantly, where for them to be reaching toward $1 million or more is not out of perspective, out of the realm. So we don't see it so much in the pet sitter industry, but I would suggest to pet sitters that if you're growing your organization, or dog walkers, if you're growing your organization, especially in larger communities like New York, Chicago, Dallas, Fort Worth, LA, where you have a lot of people in a very tight area and you're growing that business, think about if you decided, I want to buy the next person out because I want to take over that. What would that look like for you, or for somebody to come to you and say, Colin, man, you've done a fantastic job in your area. We'd like to give you $2 million so we can take over that area and add it to what we're doing. So it's sort of an interesting way to say, wow, man, I could sort of start a new career, right? So I realize that it's sort of a new idea, but I would like, really, as small business owners, because pet sitters, dog walkers, groomers, you are small business owners. Is there a possibility that you could get big enough and strong enough that somebody would want to buy you out? And if so, what would that look like? And then when you part with that company that you've built, that you've birthed basically and built up, how is that going to feel to watch somebody else run it and do it differently? Because it won't be your touch anymore. It'll be their touch on the company. What does that look like? And I don't think we're far off from the possibility in this industry of moving from buying and selling of doggy daycares to buying and selling of pet sitters and dog walkers, groomers who have built a significant business in a specific area.
Yeah, I think right now there are more large pet care companies than ever before. There are
Yes.
some absolute behemoths out there, and the larger you get, the more attention you get from
Yes.
these kind of investors, because all of a sudden it becomes an idea of scale. And if you've already built it, if you're already knocking it out of the park, it does become easier for them to go, why don't you just come into our suite of brands that we already have?
Right.
And
Yes.
now that's just, that's how those acquisitions go. And now you become part of that entity. And and the fact that you addressed both sides of those, Carmen, of going, okay, that's a very exciting proposition. You worked really hard to get to this point and you get this offer.
Yep.
But on the backside, what does that change? And it does kind of change the feeling of the industry. I think, especially for the pet sitting and dog walking side, it felt very much like a cottage industry for a lot longer than I think the boarding and daycare side, those true big, facilities.
Yes.
There's a lot more franchises out there. There's a lot more chains and things like that. We don't really, I think we're just kind of getting into that side of thing right now for the dog walking and pet sitting. So this is all kind of new for us to experience from our end.
Yes, but I think that you guys have a significant margin that you didn't realize that you had. In fact, when I talk to the boarding industry, our big competition is pet sitters. How many pet sitters are pulling away from boarding facilities? So and I understand that from a perspective of, I'm a business owner and I've got this fantastic pet sitter and man, they're just taking my clients. But I also like to approach it from a different point of view. What if I can collaborate with that pet sitter who's taking a lot of my clients? How can I bring that pet sitter into my fold to help me with clients whose pets don't do really well in a boarding facility? And so now we're referring because they have a pet that that pet would do really well at doggy daycare, but they have a pet that would do really well with a pet sitter. So how do we start collaborating instead of saying, well, you're taking from me, and start collaborating on that? And I think this is really important for pet sitting and dog walkers to really think about. You're building your brand. So how do you collaborate with a boarding and daycare facility and build your brand together as a trusted advisor for your community. So, and I would say this with dog trainers and groomers. Are you building your brand and are you collaborating with boarding facilities? I'm always talking to boarding facilities about collaborating with the veterinarians in their community. So as a pet service industry, how do we all collaborate? Let's go 360. How do we collaborate all of that together for the betterment of the pets and the humans in our industry and their care, whether it's pet sitting, grooming, dog walking, boarding, daycare, veterinarian help? How do we do that together?
Yeah, it really is going to be increasingly important moving forward, especially as we look for ways to differentiate our business. Taking this from both sides of is it a crowded market? How do I develop basically a little community around me? And do we really view ourselves as a hub that's connecting different spokes to people's needs? And are we all on the same page? And that it's on everybody to be networking, to be talking, to be building that out. And it's not going to be the same for everybody. And that's fine. But who is your, it's kind of like, who is your go-to recommendation if for your trainer, for your behaviorist, for your nutritionist, for your vet, for your groomer, for your boarding, for your daycare? Who is your one go-to? That's all you need. You don't need 15 on your list. Right?
You just need a relationship that you can know and trust. So I think when we start looking at building it that way, then when we have these acquisitions that come knocking on our door, now we're thinking, wait a minute. Do I have somebody in my community that would rather have this business because they've been part of it, right? So now we start thinking differently, even though the money's good and maybe this is a sweet time to get out, take that acquisition and walk. But maybe we need to start thinking about it differently because mergers and acquisitions happen in industries where there's a lot, if I can use the word division.
Yes.
So the more separated we are, the more divided we are, the more they want to come in because it's easy to buy in and sell, build it to where you need it and sell it. So how do we as a community make ourselves less vulnerable to that? And not that it's a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. Not that it's a bad thing, but if we want to stay small business and we want it to have the touch of we're family, how do we maintain that idea? It's very difficult to do with when you're merged or acquired by a larger company. Even though you may keep all your staff there, they may keep your staff. It all changes. How it functions, it changes. And the other thing we're noticing is that once a boarding facility gets bought out, they're no longer part of the association because the larger company doesn't see value in association.
Oh.
So it changes how even your people learn.
Wow. And that has some long-term detrimental impacts, I could imagine, if you just think of people in the industry in kind of this larger fold, not having access to ongoing education and the professional development and these conferences and the changes there because they're kind of locked away. And then again, siloed, right? It's like, nope, you're not connected to anything else. And so this idea of coming resilient to that, thinking from an industry perspective, and I love what you're bringing here, Carmen, because you're thinking big industry wide, not just an individual business, but going from a resilient industry wide perspective, kind of becoming vertically integrated of who are not that you're running a daycare, but who's your daycare that you can reference to, but maybe when they want to sell, they may talk to you about it because you have such a good relationship. And likewise, if you have a really good relationship and you're looking to sell, you can, transition to another phase in your life. You have other connections to go to. Hey, is this something that you'd like to take over? And let's talk about what that would look like.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's sort of, it's a real challenging in this market, but really back to where we were talking about this market, how big is the market? So, one of the things that I thought was really interesting is pet health insurance to cover the rising costs is expected to show a compound annual growth rate, which is CAGR, of 17.5% through 2030. So that's pet insurance. So now let's think about that. Who's getting pet insurance? Well, your clients. If you're a pet sitter, I'm sure your clients are getting pet insurance. groomers, I'm sure your clients are getting pet insurance, boarding, daycare. They're getting, because why? Because the cost to take your pet to the vet is increasing. So just the pet insurance alone by 2030 is expected, just that piece is expected to rise to a $10 billion market in 2030. That's just one little slice, right? So when we start to look at how each little piece of our industry is growing into the billions, we could see why everybody's trying to jump in.
Yeah.
The question is, do we want everybody jumping in? Is that good for us or negative for us? And I don't know, maybe it'll be years down the road before we really see the good and the bad of that change for this time frame. But I think it's really, really challenging. And then I think the other thing that's going to be challenging to us in pet sitters, you should be, those of you in Colorado, this is something to think about. So Colorado approved Proposition 129 in 2024, and it creates a new profession called the Veterinary Professional Associate. So I was like, the what? What is this? And how do I learn about this? So I do what I do. I get in and I start going down the path of research. So basically, the short version is that this position doesn't exist anywhere in the nation. And so it is sort of like our physician assistant is in the medical world. So maybe our doctor has a PA and we go see the physician assistant. Well, the physician assistant in the medical world for us, they have to have 3 years of graduate school and 2,000 hours of hands-on clinical practice. But Colorado State University has proposed that this veterinarian assistant would only have to do 3 semesters of online classes and 2 semesters of clinical work. The law does say that they would not be able to prescribe medicine because that's a federal law, but they would be able to do almost everything a veterinarian does. And the law does say that this VPA would have to be under a veterinarian, but they don't say whether that veterinarian has to be in the same building, in the same state, how they would have to be under a veterinarian. But I thought about this. Now, here's the interesting part. Let's say I'm a vet tech and I've decided I want to go out and I want to add pet sitting to my repertoire. So I've done my certification with NAPS for my pet sitting piece. I'm already a vet tech and I've got this NAPS piece. Now I'm in Colorado and this VPA position comes up and I'm like, I can do that 3 semesters of online class work, and I've already got 2 semesters of clinical work, at least because I'm a vet tech. Now I'll be able to make sure that the pets that I have in my care are caught up in all their immunizations because I can do it for them right there in their house. If there's any medical things that I have capable of taking care of, I can do that as long as I'm under a veterinarian. So and all of a sudden, the possibility, at least in the state of Colorado, the possibility of a pet sitter, a dog walker, a groomer, or a vet tech, if they have the capacity to do 3 semesters of online classwork and 2 semesters of clinical work, you can add exponentially to your portfolio of what you can provide your clients, at least in the state of Colorado. Now put that into a boarding and daycare where often we have people that are not keeping up on their immunizations. Now you can solve that problem right in your boarding and daycare.
Well, and as a marketing advantage too, to have one of those people on staff like that,
right.
When you look at like what the kind of care that people are looking for their pets,
yes.
If you can, we know some that have, a vet on call, right? Or they have a partnership with the veterinary, but to say, oh no, here's this new kind of position that we have in-house, it really does strengthen your offering that you're able to give to your clients.
Right.
Have you heard of Time to Pet? Susan the Pet Gal has this to say.
Time to Pet has helped us grow exponentially. We believe the platform's features make us by far more professional than other companies who use conventional dashboards. They are the software gurus constantly developing and improving the platform based on user feedback. This decision was a good one.
If you're looking for new pet sitting software, check out our friends at Time to Pet. Listeners of our show will save 50% off your first 3 months by visiting timetopet.com/confessional.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, it just passed in 2024. There was a lot of veterinarians, schools, and that were against it. Boards, organizations came out against it. The Dumb Friends League and several animal welfare organizations pushed for it, and it did pass. It was like 52.8 to 47.2%. Wow. So it was more than 50% wanted to have this idea of EPA. I thought that was sort of an interesting legislative piece to come out that I wasn't even following. I was like, oh my word, who knew? So
well, that does get to, again, this, the larger you get, the more attention you get. Yes, from even the capital and the investment, but also from legislation and from regulations too. And that's something that we talk a lot about from our perspective as dog walkers and pet sitters, of like, this is almost a completely unregulated industry. So I was curious, from what you're seeing, what kind of regulations are you seeing that come up that are impacting businesses and how they're able to run?
Well, I think probably the most significant one outside of this VPA is Ollie's Law that's happened in Massachusetts. I have been privileged to be for a couple of years in on Ollie's Law and what that would look like and how that would be put into place, how that would play out. And so last week, I was asked to serve on the committee in Massachusetts for now that the law has passed. Okay, great. How do we implement? What does that look like? And how will that affect boarding and daycare and other in the industry who feel that it would affect them, such as, are you a breeder? Will this law affect you? And if so, what will that look like? So the committee has not even met yet. So we're at the law's passed, but we're at these very first stages of, okay, what does it mean now for the committee of how we're going to talk about how this law works? Are we requiring certification? Where would that certification come from? Are we going to build a certification program? Are we going to look at other certifications that are out there and incorporate those? So there's a whole lot of conversation that needs to go on. But I think that's probably a very significant passing Ollie's Law, because I do believe that the goal is to make it a template for, if we do it well, for legislation that could be a template for other states on how we could have regulation that would not be too onerous on boarding and daycare, breeders, groomers, and others.
And again, this was born out of the little Labradoodle who suffered some severe injuries while boarding, and this set up this, as you said, this kind of oversight to start instituting or recommending some more safety and some more guidelines for how the licensing would work.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you notice, except for the state of Colorado, which has had regulation for boarding and daycare for decades, that came out of an agreement with legislators and American Boarding Kennel Association when they were still in business. So that legislation has been there for decades. But when we start looking at legislation across the United States, most of the time the legislation is written and passed and it's in response to some tragedy. California legislation was passed when a dog's tail got cut off, and legislation was passed when a facility caught on fire. So we have these, backlash type legislation, not legislation that is really well thought out. So the Ollie's Law was a step in the way of, let's talk about it in a reasonable manner. Let's really think about and consider the businesses, the people who are running those businesses, and how this law could affect them as business owners, as well as how much money is it going to cost them to meet the requirement. So I think we have a real challenge before us with Ollie's Law of how we make that successful as a law. That's what I'm hoping for, being on the committees that I can advocate for my industry and say, okay, it's not that I'm anti-regulation, but I don't want regulation that we cannot meet at any level. I don't care how small the business is or how large it is. I want it to be equal and that everybody can meet the legislation and it doesn't become a challenge where you can't stay in business or it's unreasonable in its expectations.
Well, because some regulations do get passed in that sense is almost a pulling up the ladder behind you as you go of, we'll make these so onerous that nobody below, $2 million can actually implement these with the policies and the staffing and all in the whatever that would be. And so I don't envy you in your position, Carmen, but I know it is it is obviously one of those things where at the end of the day, everybody has the safety and in the best interest of the pets and the owners at heart. Like that's where we all want. But there does become tension of how do you then implement that? And that's something that I know that the pet sitting and dog walking industry has been continually faced with. It was the news, pops up of pet sitter does this, dog walker does this unlicensed person does this. And it's just, it's kind of reaching this point where something feels like it's going to happen at any moment. And to know that in those instances, that kind of, as you said, that reactionary, that knee-jerk reaction kind of regulation, that really does kind of put us in a really bad spot. So to have an opportunity to get ahead of that, to have those voices at the table for Ollie's Law, at least, is really a good sign that some sensible heads are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when I think about these regulations and how it's going to affect the industry, I also think about other things that would affect boarding, daycare, and pet sitters that we have not yet really seen a push in our industry. So there's this report that came out by Nielsen, a Nielsen report, and they were looking at next generations of how next generations what kind of pets were they getting involved in. And I thought this was really sort of interesting that Generation Z or Z, their preferences are way beyond whatever we thought. They are beyond dogs and cats. They are into, their focal point is birds, fish, and reptiles. That is what Generation Z is getting into. So if you start thinking as a pet sitter or a boarding facility, how am I going to board avians? For the pet sitters, okay, I've got to walk into somebody's house and I've got to take care of these birds, or I've got to take care of a fish tank, or I've got, pick your favorite reptile. I don't know, but if this is what Generation Z is interested in, and that's what's growing in their industry, are we educated on the care of those? And are we prepared as a boarding and daycare to even hire a pet sitter to go take care of that fish tank, or hire a pet sitter to go take care of that reptile? Or maybe we have capacity to bring that reptile in or bring that avian in. How does that change? How does that change our space at a boarding and daycare facility? What kind of education do we have to have in that? And then for the pet sitter, it's now you have to learn how to take care of a new species, because that's the next generation.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of looking ahead is really important just from a business owner perspective, because we can get so nose down focused on what we're doing day to day that when we forget to look up, we can kind of go, oh, wait, what happened to all of my clients? Right? Or what happened? Right. That's weird. And it's kind of only in retrospect where we tend to go, oh, that's weird. I had 10 calls this week for lizards. Right. That's kind of odd. Let me figure this out. And it is yet another reminder of the importance of, tracking those intake calls, of going, who is calling you and what are they asking for? Because you might not be able to meet their needs now, but if you start getting those calls all the time, that should be a really strong signal to us to then go, maybe I need to relook at this and try and figure out, should I move in this direction?
Right. And I think it's really important if you have a relationship with a retailer in an area that, is carrying like snakes and spiders and whatever, hamsters, whatever it is, that you're talking to them. Are you seeing sales go up? And then make sure that you're building a relationship with them, that I have the capacity as a pet sitter to take care of that, or I have a capacity as a boarding facility to bring these species into my facility, and really talk about that with those retailers, because that's where we're seeing these trigger points. We're not seeing it in that they're asking for care yet. Where we're seeing is that retailers are reporting that sales of these different species are increasing. So, and the food for these different species is increasing. So that's our moment to say, wait a minute, if they're buying and they're bringing it home, eventually they're going to need some kind of care. And are we prepared to bring that on, which is very different than traditionally, which was traditionally dogs. And then we added felines, and now we're adding all these other species. And so we really need to stay tuned to that. And then when we're talking about marketing, the other thing that came out of this report is that 56% of Gen Z watch YouTube streaming. That's where they're getting their marketing from. So that's really important. If you're a pet sitter, do you have a small website and do you have a YouTube channel where you're putting that out and you're talking about what you're doing, the education you have, funny stories? Are you YouTube streaming, making yourself interesting so that you're grabbing that next generation of clients?
You were talking about those specialty stores, and you just reminded me, I have a to-do list. There's a store near us that sells birds. That they specifically focus on parrots and cockatiels and things like that. I'm making a note to go back and talk with them because, I kind of like to go back. It is, again, this importance of networking, and the onus is on us. And that way we can, it's one thing. I think that it's a great reminder. It's one thing to get on and read industry reports. It's another to go into our local market and talk to other local business owners and just ask, how is it going? Right. And whenever that person kind of wipes their brow and they go, oh my gosh, it's been insane. I've sold so many birds this past week, or I've sold so many, lizards, or I've sold or I can't keep tarantulas in stock. They're flying off. It's like, okay, now I need to start developing this relationship and just being there as a resource. And you mentioned that even with the YouTube aspect of going, I just want to be a resource and an educational connection to here. So then I have to go then and get my education, get connected to, an organization or whatever, and go and learn this stuff. And even just talking with those local specialty shop owners and learning from them, because that way they know that you know your stuff because they taught it to you, right? Like that's another great relationship to have.
Yes. Yeah. It's sort of challenging, I think, because I was listening to a class last year, and it wasn't even in our industry. The lady was talking about business and how we used to have a 5 to 7 to 10 year business plan. And now she said at the time, which was in 2023, businesses were having to remarket themselves every 3 years. So every 3 years, you are building who you are all over again. You're sort of like rebranding, refreshing, not to a whole, but you're just making yourself something new. And she said that she felt within the next 3 to 5 years that we would be down to almost twice a year, refreshing ourselves, reaching out, because the world around us is moving at that high speed. So how are you as a business owner keeping up on the changes that are happening in your environment, in your local community and industry-wide? And so I think that's a real challenge when you're building relationships, whether it's you going to the local avian store, or if it's me going to my local store where I'm buying my dog food from, or it's me going to my boarding and daycare facility, or if it's me going to the groomer. What kind of relationships am I building just because of the industry that I serve? But am I encouraging them to build relationships because the market is changing so fast and our consumers are consuming information in a different way than they have before? And so am I ahead of that game? That's a challenge.
Yeah. Well, and what are their expectations? What are they actively looking for in a care provider? And I think that loops right back into what we started this with, is that this discussion of regulations, right? As clients become more and more educated They follow
Mhm.
these kind of laws, these rules, these regulations, and they start
Yep.
looking for that. Is this
That's
business
right.
abiding by that? They know what's out there and what
Right.
they actually want. And so it is beholden on us to obviously advocate for good regulation and good things, and then
Yes.
abide by it, and then follow that
Right.
and push others to do that as well. Because that's how we start getting, kind of all on the same page with these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's really important for pet sitters. And I've come across this a lot in this past year, is that there's a lot of pet sitting happening, and in their community, if it's not done a certain way, they get themselves in trouble. So I think it's really imperative for pet sitters, specifically if you're going to bring a pet into your home, that you understand, as opposed to going to somebody's home and taking her, but you're going to bring a pet into your home, to understand your city, your county, and any state regulations, and be sure. I mean, I've seen, here's one little city and you can do it, but you cross the street and you're in another city and they won't let you. So you can't just assume that, oh, I can do this. Really understand the laws and make sure that you're abiding by them, because then you'll get yourself in trouble. And I've come across this a lot in the state of Texas recently. So,
Well, I know there's still some confusion in our industry as getting what it means to even get a business license, because they go, oh, well, there's
right.
no license to be a pet sitter, so I don't need to do anything. It's like, well, no, but you need a license to operate as a
Right.
business, because you are one.
Right.
And then if you do, because this is another thing of when people look to add revenue streams, or they do this
Yes.
process that we've just discussed of going, wow, everybody's asking me for boarding. Oh, I'll
Right.
just bring the dogs to my home. I can offer boarding.
Right.
Let me just do that. And without then looking into going, what are the legalities around this? What are the actual
Right.
You're right. Then it just takes one neighbor to all of a sudden file a complaint or a noise thing,
And you're done.
and it's done.
Yep. Yep. That's all it takes. And then also, when we think about pet sitting, I know this is a little bit, we've moved beyond it now, but remember when the dog flu, the new version of the dog flu came out, and we did not realize that I could run up against a dog, and that I picked that up, and then I go to the next place and I pet that dog. I've just passed on that dog flu. We did not have that understanding. So also, when you decide that you're going to be in the business, even though you may not be boarding in daycare, you still need to know what the vaccination records of those pets that you're caring for are, so that you protect yourself and your other clients as you're going from house to house, or if you do have to bring a dog into your home or a cat into your home, that you are protecting your own pets. So it's really important, even though you are pet sitting, I think there's a lot of things that you still have to check off that are the same as boarding and daycare facilities need to check off. And I think sometimes we forget about that.
No, we do. I hear a lot of people who go, well, because I'm not bringing two dogs from different families together, I don't even need to know the vaccination status. And I think we do ourselves a big disservice about that, because, we as our company, so we've taken care of plenty of immunocompromised dogs, and they they cannot have some of the vaccinations. But we know that. And so we know this is a higher risk animal. And so we have to do our due diligence and be hyper aware of the status of every other dog that we're taking care of, because otherwise we can really impact that dog and that family. And if they, they're looking for safety, they're looking for security. And if we don't have that knowledge, at least, it really, really hurts everybody involved.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that when we look at the industry, of course, we know we have this buying and selling, and we see that there's all this legislation coming out. And I think consistently what we need to do, as we've been discussing, is we need to make sure we're educating ourselves properly, that we understand what the laws in our community are currently, and that we're abiding by those. But also, I think that we need to start looking at industry-wide, what is best practices? And why do we call that a best practice? Not because we want to, well, I do it this way, so that's the best practice. But no, what are best practices, right? Right? Because the practice can be done across the industry. And so it's a best practice and it keeps the pets safe in our care. So I think we need to start talking when we're talking to our clients, when we're marketing, when we're talking to others in our industry, or we're crossing over to the retail or boarding or whoever we're talking with in our industry, that we're also talking about what we're doing as best practices and asking them, what do you do for best practice in this, fill in the blank, so that we are using the language that we want the consumers to catch on to. And again, we're setting the standard for the consumer. We want to become the trusted advisor to our clients. So how are we going to do that? We're going to set the standard. So as a community of pet care service providers, no matter where you're doing that, are you setting the standard of best practice? And are you the trusted advisor? And are you communicating that to your fellow community providers?
Words are really important, and I've struggled so much, right? I've been with just the language of what to call even some services sometimes, and to realize that at the end of the day, like, you can have all of these letters after your name and all these certifications and all these years of experience, but if the client doesn't understand that, it's all kind of meaningless at that point. And so again, there's a lot that rides on our shoulders, it turns out. But as an industry, when we're all working on this, it helps propel the messaging much, much faster. Because if they're hearing the same term from their groomer and from their trainer and from the boarding and from the pet sitter and from the vet, and like all of a sudden they go, oh, I get it now. I understand what that, because everybody kind of is on the same page. And it's not like a, smoky backroom collusion thing. It's everybody coming together and just having a conversation about this and going, oh, you use that term? Great. I use that term, right? It's just talk to people. Operating a professional pet sitting or dog walking business can be rewarding and profitable, but it can also be challenging and even lonely. That's why Pet Sitters International is committed to giving you access to the credentials, continuing education, and community you need to succeed. From a new toolkit and training each month to an on-demand learning library to their private member Facebook group and annual conferences, PSI's members' benefit are designed to help you live your best life as a pet sitter. Visit petsit.com/join to learn more and use the promo code Confessional15 at checkout to save $15 off your first year.
Right. And I think you're right. I think it does help us when we start to use the same terms and we start to show our professionalism in the industry, that we really are upping how we're talking. Okay, we're not just sitting here using words, but we're actually doing that. We're demonstrating that. And so now when we come up across what we're going to call the hobbyist, who, no offense to anybody who's using rover.com and you're a professional and you're licensed to be, but if you're just, here's Carmen and she's got an extra room in her house. So she decided she's going to turn that room into her boarding facility, and she's gone to rover.com and she has nothing behind her name, no training. She doesn't even have pet CPR and first aid. I mean, she's got nothing. I think now we start to set ourselves apart from this level of I can do it because I got extra time. And I think that's really what we need to be focused on, because if there is a threat to our industry, to all of us, it's those who are providing services and they have no idea what they're doing. If something happened with the pet, they would have no idea how to take care of the pet. They would have no idea of how to do the CPR and first aid. They wouldn't understand why they needed to have the vaccination records. There would just be no understanding of that. So I think it's really body language. Okay, I've got a group of dogs. I'm at a dog park, body language. How many consumers actually understand body language when they take their dog to a dog park? And those are the people that are just like, oh, I can do this for extra money. So I think we really, really need to really talk about our education, what we're doing, how we do it. And we use that same language with our peers and with our consumers. And that will set us apart from this threat that's coming from people who just want to do it because they've got time and they want to build a little extra money, but it's not a profession for them.
Right. And there will always be a sliver of the consumer
Yes.
who is looking for just the bare bones cheap option. They don't really care.
Absolutely.
Right? There will
Absolutely.
always be that. But you also have, and you led with this statistic of this increase of expenditure on pet insurance. Right? That doesn't come from uneducated, unpassionate, price sensitive consumers. And so if we're seeing this trend towards purchasing of this kind of quality and this kind of item, this shows, at least in this one little sliver, and I know that this is also backed up by the kind of products that are being purchased at stores, the kind of experiences that people want for their pets, and the upgrades that they provide, at doggy daycares, and you can get all sorts of add-on packages and stuff, and people clamor for those. So if we have that, we also know that people are wanting the best, and so we as an industry get to define what is best. And what does that mean? So that when people go looking for that, because you can go right now, I can Google right now, best dog walker near me. Doesn't really mean anything a whole lot in a lot of cases.
Right. It may be that person had 10 people and they loved that person. And so those 10 people, said it. And the guy who's doing thousands, he's not getting any comments at all. So it really is. Yeah, it's really imperative that we really set aside what we do. Also, in that same study, they were talking about this Generation Z that also they don't mind spending money on quality dog food. And so they're looking for human grade dog food and even fresh dog food. So that money there, it's not a problem for them. So we don't, even in this next generation coming up, they're not. So the reason we're seeing this push, let me back up for a minute. The reason we see them into pets the way they are is because they're waiting longer to get married and or have children. And some of them have chosen not to have children because it's actually cheaper to have a pet and spend all that money on a pet than it is to bring a child into the world. Education is over $300,000, and that's just to get them once you get to college. We haven't even talked about how much money to raise them before we spend the $300,000 on their education. So it's actually cheaper to have a pet, and they're pushing to not have children or waiting later in their life to do that. So this pet idea is becoming stronger in this Generation Z. And so it creates a lot of interesting futures for us in the pet care service industry. What is that going to look like?
Yeah. And that does take working together and having these kind of conversations, doesn't it? Right. And
absolutely.
It's a little terrifying, right? Because it is kind of a little open-ended box there, but it also should be encouraging to us. I feel like is that going, hey, we can set that standard and define it too.
Right. And I think probably we have sort of as an industry have stepped back from some of these things. We're like, oh no, that won't happen. That won't happen. And one of the things I think that we thought wouldn't happen was that the regulation would never really quite make it while we were still doing. So I've been in this industry for 30 years and I've heard regulations come and it hasn't come for the last 30 years. I just don't see it happening. And now,
yeah.
So I think that the things that we have traditionally seen or traditionally believed about our industry, all of that, we have to set all of that aside. We need to rethink our industry, where it's going, what's going to be required of us, how fast information is getting out, and how fast the consumer can find information very quickly, and how AI is changing the landscape for us as pet care service providers, the software that we use, how we market, all of that is changing our future, and is changing it quicker than we could realize. And so we are in a very intense learning curve, I think, in our industry as we try to quickly make changes that we need to make to stay ahead of the next guy. And we still have a lot of people coming in and building beautiful facilities. So There's still a lot of area for other people to come in. I wanted to go back to that original document where I was talking about the M&A, the mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah.
So private equity firms, they call it the unprecedented war chest of $2 trillion.
Yeah.
That's the amount of money that's out there for investment in our industry in some way, shape, or form, specifically M&A, but in some way, shape, or form. That's a lot of money to be invested in our industry if we wanted to tap into some of that. So I think it's just such an interesting time to be in the industry because there's so many possibilities. I mean, we have AI that's using new technology with, you can have a little laser thing you can play with your cat or your dog when you're not home. You can, send messages to your cat or your dog. You have AI technology robots that roll around to keep your animal interested. I mean, there's just all these very unique things that are happening, not to mention how AI is affecting our software as a service. So whatever software you're using to book clients, their information, how you collect that information, how easy that technology is to use. Can I use it on my cell phone? Is it really intuitive? Because that's the other thing we're seeing in these younger generations is, man, they don't make me figure it out. Make it intuitive for me. Make it easy for me to find what I want, click, and pay. And this is sort of off subject, but at the church I attend, we had a business meeting this last week. And one individual, I was shocked, it was a high school teacher, said, "So do you have it yet where we can pay, where we don't have to use our cards, but we can use our," my mind just went blank. Use your money from the computer.
The app, like Apple Pay or that kind of stuff too, or
yes.
or pay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So can you do it that way? And so it was like, well, yes. And then it was like, well, what about Bitcoin? Can I pay with Bitcoin? And I was like, oh my word! I never even thought about that. Now this isn't church, but I was like, that's an interesting idea. Could I, as a client, call my boarding facility and say, "Hey, Joy, can I pay with Bitcoin for my next service?"
Yeah.
I don't know. But if we are moving to a society where we don't want to have a credit card, we don't want to have cash, and we're going into this whole Bitcoin thing, what would that look like if now we started saying we'll take payments with Bitcoin?
Well, I did have this question for you of like, because you mentioned the businesses who had been in business for 30 years or more.
Yes.
And with all the changes that are going on now, like what is it really like to start a new business in 2025? Because you're making my head spin just realizing of every year, every business that starts has brand new challenges to it. And some of them are the same,
right.
Like some of them, but like the new world that these are being thrust into. So, from your perspective and from your members, kind of what are you seeing, like either like challenges for a new business, or I guess maybe even opportunities too?
I think probably one of the opportunities, which could also be a challenge, I have a new boarding and daycare that is building in Asheville, North Carolina. And when I go look at their plans for what they're putting in privacy fencing that has a wind rating, that has a noise cancellation rating. So the wind rating is 130 miles per hour. The noise cancellation is up to 98% of sound pollution. It has UV inhibitors, and it keeps its colors even in temperatures as low as 40 degrees below zero and up to 140 degrees. Now I'm thinking, okay, that's a wide range, man. It's durable and resistant to potential inflicted damage like dirt, graffiti, or stains. It lasts a lifetime. It's environmentally friendly. And then they're using the Power Loo, a flushing dog toilet. It's equal friendly. It has no more plastic bags. You take the poop, you throw it into the Power Loo, and you flush it. It goes into the system. Now, this is for a dog boarding and daycare center. And so I'm thinking about, it has only uses 1.6 gallons of water to propel the waste into the system, the sewer system. I'm thinking about what they're building their buildings out of. All of this new green technology that we're using. So the learning curve, I think, when you're coming into this street, especially if you're building from scratch, boarding a daycare facility, is what is the learning curve on understanding how all the new products work together, how that you can build a boarding facility that decreases your cost to maintain and doesn't add carbons to the environment, so all the things that you're thinking about as just getting that done, and then how you're financing it. And when you now you're trying to get it open in a certain amount of time, how are you doing that training before you open the doors? So you don't open the doors and you're trying to do training with brand new employees. So how are you going to get that done ahead of time? Your risk management safety plan, depending on where you are in the United States, how are you doing that? Now, it's not that this hasn't been going on before, but I think technology has now moved so quickly and so fast that the learning curve on just products that are available today may change, because there may be a better product tomorrow. So you're in the middle of your building and you find a better product. Can you switch for the better product, So I just think, there's just so many new things out there just in the building process. And then the dollars, especially in during this time of inflation. And let's say you started and you were going to build, and then inflation hits, and now it's harder. It's the money that you need, it's becoming more expensive. So does that cause you to have to change plans on your building? How is a person navigating that? I think this is a really could be challenging time to come into the industry when we're having so many different things happen, high inflation, and now we may have some tariff issues. So there may be product that you want to bring in that's produced outside. So the cost of that, maybe at the time that you ordered that product, now a tariff charge is going to happen, increase the cost of that product to you. Even products that we're using in everyday boarding and daycare, where is that product coming from? How is tariffs affecting? Maybe you're the end user, but there's things that are happening to that product to get to you that tariffs are causing a problem, or the cost of transportation is causing a problem for you, increasing your prices. So I think that there's some real financial considerations right now in the industry. And we coming off of 2020, 2021, 2022, man, we shot it out of the park. 2023, it was looking really great. So we were making, wow, 2024 is going to be like brilliant. And then it flatlined. It's not that we didn't grow. It's just that we had prepared for something much larger than we actually got. And so there was pulling back in the industry in 2024. And in 2025, we're like nervously putting our toe in the water, because what's going to happen next? Because the environment's not what we expected.
Yeah. And that, I just going back to just the fence alone, when we talk about the advancement of technology, it's not just computers and AI and that kind of stuff. It's the technology that went into the development of a fence that can handle that kind of range of temperatures and also sound temperature. It's like, what? And so, you come in and you just, that simple question of just like, oh, I need a fence. And it's like, well, what do you want your fence to do for you? And it's like, 30 years ago, it was keep the dogs in. And now it's, oh, well, we can dampen noise. We can, do this. It will stand a hurricane. It's like, wow. And that's just one example that you brought up there. And then to know that my little small business here is more globally connected than ever, is more sensitive to the global network of business and trade than ever before. And how we have to have some pulse and idea of that, constantly checking those prices, constantly in contact with our supplier, seeing what's going on there, and looking at alternatives to substitute in when and if we need to. So the complexity of the business, where it used to just be, well, I only have what's down at the store. Maybe I have a specialty catalog. Now I can order from Amazon. And now it's the possibilities are literally endless of where you can get things and what you're bringing in. And that we're just
right.
that more global connection, I think, is something that Megan and I, even just in our little dog walking and pet sitting world, of just how sensitive we are to that alone, because it impacts our clients too, and that it's
Yes.
more the when we talk about our local community, our local economic thing, that gets just a little bit bigger the more connected everything else is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that we do not realize how global we are connected until we start to have to go shop for something. And I think for pet sitters and dog walkers, if you're in a community where you're walking to all your clients, that's one thing. But if you're a community where you're driving, so for my boarding and daycare facility, they also do pet sitting and they also do transportation where they'll go get the pet and bring it back. Well, when the gas prices go through the roof, of course, now they're saying, okay, how do we do this more efficiently well? So now they're looking for different traffic routes. They're sort of like the UPS man. Can I get there and do nothing but right-hand turns the whole time, or do I have to go to the light, stop and make a left-hand turn, So they're starting to map out, where they're going. And then do I need to size down that, or do I need to stop it for a while? Because the cost of providing that service is just so, my clients are not going to pay for it. So I think that's a real challenge when we start to see how outside pressures cause us to change our services and what we're offering. And I think also we come into the idea we're going to offer a certain level of services. We're going to offer services, and then maybe a vertical that we're offering is not doing very well. And so sometimes it's hard for people to say, okay, I'm just going to drop that service and move on. I'm not going to fuss about it. We try to nurture that service. And sometimes I think it's really hard for us to say, you know what, that's not working. So let's stop that and let's focus what is working, and not try to save this little thing over here that I thought was really important for my business.
I've learned of something. It's called the IKEA effect. Of people take more pride and ownership in the things that they've built than the things that they didn't. And I think as a business owner, I am so sensitive to this because we should. It's not that we shouldn't take pride and ownership in the things that we build, but sometimes the thing that we build, it might not be the best. And yet I cling to it because I'm the one who built it. And it's really hard to say, no, that IKEA furniture, that's not going to be a family heirloom in 100 years. We just need to be perfectly honest. Like it's okay. It served a purpose. We learned. We can let it go. And the same thing with our services and our own business of going, just because I built it doesn't mean that it's going to be, it was built originally to last 100 years. Now I can make it last by learning, changing, and adapting, growing, and swapping out parts. And I do have to let go of some things sometimes because it's not taking off. It's just not worth my time and expense. Clients aren't interested in it. I have need to drop something for that reason. And we do struggle with that. I know it's been really hard for Megan and I to go, no, I need to cleave this off because it's like, oh, my baby, why would I do that? But it's like, no, we're saving the ship. We got to let this go.
Right. Yeah, it's really hard. As an association, we suffer from the same thing. I mean, this week we've been talking about. We know that Generation Z is going to be having these other pets, so we have built certification programs for avian, small mammal exotics, hamsters, rabbits. I mean, we built education for each of these species, and we even went to the California reptile industry, and I think it was the California Association for Reptiles, and they built us education for the top 10 reptiles in the United States. So we paid for it, but we never implemented it because we're like, oh, this is never going to happen. But now that we're seeing this Generation Z thing where it could be an important education piece in the industry, so we're pulling it off the shelf. At the same time, certification programs that we've offered in the way we've offered them, basically canine and feline, we're looking at that. We're like, okay, you know what? I think the way we offered that does not meet the way our learners are learning. So how are we going to dust this off and change this so now it meets the new learner idea of how we learn? So, which is very, very different from the way I learned. So sometimes it's even taking whatever vertical product, whatever service you're offering, and thinking about it in a different way and saying, okay, how do I refresh this and make it valuable to my my consumer in today's market. It worked great 5 years ago, but maybe I need to rethink that for this next generation.
Yeah, and it's everything from how we're educating them to, you mentioned it earlier, how they're booking, right? I know many people,
Yep.
I mean, I myself, like I'm a very desktop first person. If I have serious work to do, I'm busting out the laptop. I've got a second screen,
Right.
but I know that's not how most people do anything anymore. And so when we're like, when we're thinking even through like what our website looks like, or what's the workflow, or where's the button placement, it's like, well, here, I've got a nice big beautiful screen here, look, it's 40 inches. And it's like, no, Colin, no, that's, nobody's looking at this on a 40-inch screen. Stop being
right. No, it is really true. So I think we're living in a very exciting time in our industry. We have so many new things coming in, whether it's technology wise, whether it's how we feed pets, whether it's how the collars, even collars and halters that we're using, they're changing some of those, making them more user friendly for our clients, for us, for the pets. How we keep our pets healthy, products that we use. I mean, at first we always said, oh, you can't use essential oils at all. Now we have a whole essential oil veterinarian program that are teaching consumers how to use essential oils with their pets and do that wisely and safely. So we understand that now massage therapy can be different. We understand that having water for the dogs to play in could be healthy. We're even understanding that cat daycare can be healthy for cats in our care. So there's just so much that we're learning about the animals. We're always learning something new about. They're much smarter than we ever thought. And obviously they're much smarter than us because they've been waiting around for generations for us to catch up. But but there's just everything that touches us as pet care service providers, or our businesses, or the buildings, or the cars we drive, or the clothes we wear. There is so much tech out there that is being incorporated into all of that, that is making us a more green and universal community, that we cannot afford to sit back and not be trying to learn something new every day and talk to our clients about what we're learning, and then listen to our clients about what they need and what they're learning. And then once that communication starts, then we really get the fire under us to know what our next step is going to be as a pet care service provider. What do we have to do to help our clients? And what kind of education do we need? And I encourage all of you to look at other industries for inspiration of things that are happening in other industries, because usually if it's happening in another industry, you're going to see something similar to that in the industry you're in. So don't just pay attention to what's happening here in the pet care service world, but let's look at what's happening in the HVAC world. Let's look what's happening in construction. Let's look what's happening with our pet food. Are we really excited about the fact that we now have pet food that's insect-based? I don't know. I'm not really a fan, but hey, maybe that is the new thing. I don't know. What about those supplements? How, all of this affects the pets in our care. And the more knowledgeable we are about it all, the better pet care service providers we become.
Carmen, I really want to thank you for coming on the show today and encouraging us to get connected with our network, building out that community, and educating ourselves for the better care of the pets and the support of the people behind that. There's a lot of work to always be done, but it should be encouraging us that we can provide a better level of care tomorrow than we can today through our hard work. I know that this is obviously a really big topic, and you have a whole organization dedicated to helping people be educated and supporting in this. Yes. So, Carmen, if people are interested in learning more about IBPSA and getting in contact, how best can they do that?
So just reach out to Carmen at IBPSA.com, or you can visit our website at www.ibpsa.com.
Awesome. Well, I will have those links in the show notes and on the website so people can start doing that. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been so much fun. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Colin. I've enjoyed this.
How do we stay ahead of the curve? by making sure that we are the ones that are collaborating and that we are the ones that are finding best practices before regulations force our hand. The more proactive that we can be as an industry, the better off everybody is going to be. We want to thank today's sponsors, Time to Pet and Pet Sitters International, for making today's show possible, and we really want to thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll be back again soon.